Time now for an in-depth look at the global markets this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Young, thank you for making time today.
Happy to be here.
Well, last week we saw an almost 7% drop on the Dow, other Wall Street indices down by similar amounts, but then some of that was clawed back on Friday. Investors still worried, though, about a second wave of the pandemic. What's happening in the global markets, and what's your outlook?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, the U.S. market took a major drop on Thursday, partially because, well, they had the Fed FOMC meeting that day, and Chairman Powell emphasized that the recession from the coronavirus is likely to be long-lasting, and the interest rate will probably remain at zero until 2022. Now, this was more or less known information, but I think the stock market, the stock investors became sort of irrationally exuberant that perhaps the lockdown, the end of the lockdown will mean a very quick recovery, and they were faced with a whole dose of reality that the coronavirus recession will last a long time. But I noticed that the White House economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, mentioned today that he thinks that the U.S. is off to the races in a V-shaped recovery. So they're trying to build up the stock market again, which means that the stock market is really driven by short-term news, short-term optimism and pessimism, so we'll probably see a very shaky stock market from here on. For the Asian markets, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Nikkei, they all share similar story. It started dropping from Wednesday and kept on dropping more or less today as well. And that is probably due to the resurgence of coronavirus in Beijing, and that is making the investors in Asia very nervous as well. The European market for FTSE and the Euro 50, they were down most of last week, but like the United States, they had a slight rise on Friday.
And we do see that nervousness here in Korea, too, partly the pandemic, but perhaps North Korea's threats as well. What's the story in the Korean markets?
Okay, well, Kosdaq and Kospi, it started falling on Wednesday, but today they had a massive sell-off. They estimate that there was about 1 trillion won's worth of sell-off today. Kospi fell by minus 4.76%. Kosdaq fell by 7.09%. And as you mentioned, the interpretation was that there was a continuing fear of the coronavirus because the coronavirus is spreading in the Seoul metropolitan area, as well as the new threats from North Korea. But again, I think the stock market has been a bit over-optimistic, perhaps, partially because Korea has, at least we thought that we were getting the coronavirus under control, and at least for the domestic economy, it seemed to be picking up as people started to go out and take dining at restaurants or going out to picnics. So perhaps people were a bit too optimistic, and the market is adjusting to that. For example, while the Kosdaq is down 7.09%, it is still doing pretty much how it did before the coronavirus. So Kosdaq has, at least for now, recovered almost completely from the drop that we saw during the coronavirus. Kospi hasn't done as well, but still it has been recovering about 70 to 80% of the fall off that we saw during March for the due to the coronavirus. But I think people are beginning to realize that, well, perhaps things are not as optimistic as we thought it was going to be.
Now, Professor Young, we're almost out of time, but real quick, what's coming up in the week ahead?
Okay, the most interesting statistic is probably the IMD competitiveness report. Korea has this obsession of doing well on tests, and the IMD competitive report, as well as its competitor, WEF competitive report, looks at various factors in the Korean economy to compare them across countries to see whether Korea's economy is deemed competitive. And Korean press as well as Korean politicians are obsessed with what ranking, whether we placed, say, 28th or 13th in the list of countries in these reports. The IMD report last year, Korea was 28th out of 68 countries, and as soon as the report comes out, I think we'll see a lot of reports seeing whether we rose in the ranking or whether we fell in the ranking, and which area was responsible for the fall and which area was responsible for the rise.
All right, we'll be looking out for that. Thank you, Professor Young, as always, for sharing your insights.
Thank you.